On my graduation, my parents gave a toast saying, "She wasn't even supposed to be born, we wanted a boy." Because I refused to sit at their table. The next day, my aunt slapped me at brunch and said, "You're a shame to this family." I whispered back, "You're wearing the necklace I bought with my first paycheck." I'm 25 now, and I thought that after graduating college, my relationship with my parents would improve. That's what people say, right? You graduate, become your own person, and things start to change. But instead, what happened during my graduation weekend shattered something inside me that I don't think will ever heal. It was supposed to be a moment of pride, but my parents' toast and the events that followed left me questioning everything about who I am in their eyes. The morning after the dinner, I went to brunch at my Aunt Margaret's place, hoping things would calm down. Instead, I ended up being slapped across the face by my aunt, who told me I was a shame to the family. What did I do? I just whispered back that she was wearing the necklace I had bought her with my first paycheck. I had always been the quiet one in the family, often overlooked, always second to my older brother Caleb. Growing up, I learned early on that I wasn't the child my parents wanted. They tried for years to have a boy after Caleb. But after 2 heartbreaking miscarriages, they ended up with me, their second child, a daughter they never truly wanted. My name's Delilah. Growing up, I always felt like I was just a consolation prize, a what-if child that was born because they didn't know when to stop trying. My older brother Caleb was everything they had hoped for. He was the golden child. Athletic, charming, the one they could brag about at family gatherings. I was the quieter, more introverted one, always the second choice. It's strange how the world works. I had always hoped that maybe one day, my parents would realize how hard I worked to earn their approval. But the older I got, the more I realized it was never going to happen. I did my best in school, excelling in subjects they didn't care about. I worked 2 jobs to save for college and managed to get a scholarship to a decent school. But every time I did something right, I felt like it wasn't enough. Nothing was ever enough. Graduation day should have been different. I walked across that stage at my university, the first in my family to graduate, and it should have been a celebration. But when I looked out into the crowd and saw my parents, it felt like I was looking into a void. They were there physically, but emotionally, I felt like I was still invisible. The reception afterward was a small gathering, just family and a few close friends. I didn't want to sit with them at the head of the table, so I made the decision to sit at a smaller table by the window, out of the direct line of sight. I wasn't in the mood for forced smiles and obligatory compliments. But that didn't stop my mother from making sure everyone knew her opinion of me during the toast. My mother stood up, clutching her glass of champagne with both hands as if she were about to deliver some life-changing speech. The room grew quiet, and I braced myself. I had no idea what was coming, but I knew it wouldn't be good. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice firm, almost rehearsed. "I'd like to say a few words about my daughter, Delilah." I could feel the eyes of the room shifting toward me, and I could feel my heart beat faster. I couldn't tell if it was out of excitement or dread. I held my breath, waiting. "She wasn't even supposed to be born," my mother said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We wanted a boy. But here she is, and we've made do with what we have." I sat there, frozen. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The room seemed to go quiet, but I could still hear her voice echoing in my mind. I could hear her saying how I was just an afterthought, a second chance at something they never wanted in the first place. My father, who had been sitting beside her, nodded in agreement, his face unreadable. My brother Caleb, sitting next to his girlfriend Maria, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze briefly meeting mine before he quickly looked away. But the worst part wasn't the toast itself, it was the fact that everyone else in that room knew how much it hurt me, and nobody said anything. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping across the floor, the sound sharp in the stillness of the room. Without a word, I grabbed my purse and walked out, ignoring the puzzled looks from the others. The next morning, I felt the familiar weight of shame hanging over me, the humiliation that my mother had somehow made me feel all over again. I didn't want to go to brunch. I didn't want to be anywhere near them. but I didn't have a choice. My parents expected me to show up, to pretend like nothing had happened. So, I went. Aunt Margaret's house was only a short drive from my parents' hotel, and as I pulled into the driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into some kind of trap. I knew the family was disappointed in me, but I had no idea just how far they would go to make sure I knew it. As I stepped inside, the familiar smell of bacon and coffee hit me, and I felt a pang of nostalgia. Aunt Margaret's house had always been warm and welcoming, a stark contrast to the coldness of my own home. But today, the warmth felt suffocating. My mother and father were already seated at the table, their eyes still heavy with judgment. Caleb was there too, his usual smile absent, and Maria was sitting beside him, her face unreadable. Aunt Margaret stood in the kitchen, her eyes narrowing as she saw me. There was no warm greeting, just a sharp look of disapproval. I took my seat, trying to ignore the tension in the air. I hadn't been sitting for more than 5 minutes when Aunt Margaret walked up to me, her face flushed with anger. Without warning, she slapped me across the face, hard enough that my vision blurred for a moment. I could feel the sting as my cheek burned. "You're a shame to this family," Aunt Margaret hissed, her voice low and venomous. "How dare you embarrass your parents like that? How could you walk out of your own graduation dinner like that? You've embarrassed all of us." I didn't react immediately. I just sat there, holding my cheek, trying to steady my breath. The room fell deathly silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the distant clink of silverware. I could feel all their eyes on me, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to apologize. But I didn't. Instead, I whispered back, my voice quiet but steady, "You're wearing the necklace I bought you with my first paycheck." Aunt Margaret froze. Her hand was still clenched by her side, and she looked down at the silver necklace I had given her. It was a small gift, something I had worked months to afford, and I had thought it would make her proud of me. I had hoped it would be a symbol of how much I wanted to belong to this family, to finally earn their approval. But now, looking at her, I realized how naive I had been. The necklace was just a trinket to them, a reminder of the ways I had tried to fit into their mold. Aunt Margaret's face turned bright red, and for a moment, I thought she was going to lash out again. But she didn't. Instead, she walked away, muttering something under her breath. The rest of the brunch was a blur, the food tasteless and the conversation forced. No one spoke to me directly after that, and I felt more alone than I ever had before. The hours passed in a blur, and I found myself sinking deeper into the heavy silence that enveloped the room. I stayed seated at the table, feeling like an intruder at a gathering where I no longer belonged. Every now and then, my parents would exchange glances, their expressions unreadable, while Caleb shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact with me. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a blade. Aunt Margaret, after delivering that slap, had retreated to her side of the house, probably fuming with indignation. I could feel the anger radiating from her, but it wasn't the type of anger that would lead to reconciliation. No, it was the type of anger that reinforced the divide between us, the kind that made it crystal clear, in her eyes, I had crossed a line that couldn't be erased. I tried to focus on the food in front of me, but nothing tasted right. Even the pancakes, something I'd once adored, seemed bland and lifeless. The only thing that tasted real was the bitterness in my mouth, lingering from the previous day's events. I kept wondering what had happened to the family I had once been so hopeful about. Was I really this much of a disappointment to them? Was I really just an afterthought? A burden that they had to bear? When I finally couldn't take it anymore, I stood up abruptly, pushing my chair back. The scraping sound of it against the tile floor seemed to break the silence, but no one spoke. No one looked at me. I wasn't sure if they were hoping I'd leave or if they were just too exhausted to deal with me any longer. "I'm going," I said quietly, more to myself than anyone else. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't care if they wanted me to stay. I had already overstayed my welcome, and nothing was going to change that. As I grabbed my jacket and walked to the door, my mother spoke, her voice soft but sharp with reproach. "Delilah, don't you think this is all a little dramatic? I mean, it's just a little misunderstanding. why are you so upset?" Her words stung, but I didn't turn around. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I opened the door, stepped out into the bright sunlight, and walked away. I drove for what felt like hours, not sure where I was going. I needed to be alone. I needed space from my family, from the pain they caused me, from the life I had grown so disillusioned with. I drove aimlessly through the town, the streets so familiar that they felt almost foreign now. I passed the park where I used to play as a kid, the corner store where I worked after school, the local diner where I had shared countless meals with my parents before they started making me feel invisible. Eventually, I ended up at the small apartment I had rented for the last few months of college. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and it was the first place that had felt like home in a long time. The walls were bare, save for a few photos and mementos I had picked up over the years. It was quiet, peaceful, and most importantly, it was mine. I sank into the couch, letting the weight of the past few days hit me all at once. The tears came before I even realized they were coming. I wasn't sure if I was crying because of the toast, or because of Aunt Margaret's slap, or because of the emptiness I had felt in that house. But it didn't matter. The tears came anyway. The silence in the apartment was different from the silence at my parents' house. This one felt comforting, not suffocating. It was a reminder that I was on my own now, and that maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a bad thing. That evening, I received a text from Caleb. I hadn't heard from him since brunch, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. I hesitated before opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Del, I know things have been tough. I don't really know what's going on with Mom and Dad, but I want you to know that I don't agree with what they said or did. I just didn't know how to stop it. I'm sorry." It wasn't much. It wasn't a grand apology, but it was enough to make my heart ache a little. Caleb had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in their eyes. To hear him say he didn't agree with them was something I wasn't sure I could believe. But I also knew that it wasn't his fault. He had been raised the same way I had, under the same roof, with the same expectations. I wasn't angry at him, just at the circumstances we'd both been stuck in. I didn't reply to his message right away. Part of me wanted to, but I wasn't ready to open up again, not yet. I needed time to process, to figure out what I was supposed to do with this new version of my family. The next few days passed slowly. I spent most of my time at the apartment, catching up on work, sorting through old things, and generally keeping to myself. I didn't want to face anyone, not yet. I wasn't sure what to say, or how to fix what had been broken. But more than anything, I didn't want to go back to the same toxic dynamic that had haunted my entire life. I kept thinking about Aunt Margaret's slap. It stung more than the physical pain. It was the rejection, the shame, the reminder that no matter how much I tried, I would never be enough. But then, there was that necklace. The silver necklace I had bought her with my first paycheck. It had been a symbol of everything I thought I could offer this family, a gesture that would somehow make them see me, make them value me. And now, it was a bitter reminder that the people I had tried so hard to impress would never truly see me. Not for who I was, but only for who they wanted me to be. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep chasing after approval from people who had already made it clear they would never give it to me. And if that meant stepping away from them, so be it. I took a deep breath, grabbed my phone, and finally typed out a response to Caleb's message. "I get it, Caleb. I don't blame you. But I can't keep pretending everything is okay. I need some time, some space. I hope you understand." It wasn't an apology, nor was it a plea for reconciliation. It was just the truth. For the first time in my life, I was choosing me. And that was something I was finally ready to do. The next few days felt surreal. For the first time in years, I wasn't obsessed with trying to fix the broken pieces of my relationship with my family. Instead, I focused on what I needed, what I wanted. My mornings were spent at the coffee shop near my apartment, writing in my journal, reflecting on the years I'd spent trying to earn love that wasn't coming. My afternoons were quieter, a peaceful routine of reading, walking, and taking time to heal from the constant emotional strain I'd been under. I started seeing the world in a new light, as though the fog that had clouded my mind for so long was starting to clear. I didn't need to force myself into a role I didn't fit into anymore. I could define who I was on my terms, not by the expectations of my family. The truth was, they had never truly accepted me. I had spent my whole life chasing their approval, hoping they would one day see me for who I was. But now, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't my fault. It wasn't my problem. It was theirs. Then, one evening, I got another text from Caleb. "I know I haven't really reached out since brunch. I want to make sure you're okay. We don't have to talk about mom and dad, but I just don't want you to be alone through all this." His message was a lifeline. Caleb was my brother, and despite everything, I knew that he was someone who truly cared about me. But even in his message, I could feel the divide. The distance between us, the different ways we had been raised, had always kept us apart. I didn't blame him, but I also knew that he was still in their world, the one where everything I did was scrutinized, where everything about me was questioned. I sat with my phone in my hands, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to reach out to him, to pour out everything I had been holding in for so long, to tell him how I felt abandoned by the entire family. But another part of me just wanted space. I didn't want to let the hurt that had been building up all these years pour out all at once. I wasn't ready to relive the pain. Not yet. So I replied simply, "I'm doing okay, Caleb. Just taking some time for myself." I stared at my phone for a long moment before putting it down, letting out a sigh. It wasn't the response I had wanted to give, but it was all I could manage. I knew Caleb was trying, but he was still so entangled in the family's expectations, and I wasn't ready to dive back into that world. Not yet. The following week was a mix of quiet reflection and keeping my distance from everyone. I couldn't face Aunt Margaret. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing her wear that necklace I had given her, a piece of me that now felt tainted. But a part of me wondered if she even remembered where it had come from, or if she simply saw it as another trinket she could flaunt to the rest of the family. I kept replaying her slap over and over in my mind. The sting of it still lingered, but it was no longer as sharp. With each passing day, I realized that it wasn't the slap that mattered. It was the way she dismissed me, as though I was nothing more than a nuisance. I took another step back from my parents as well. I couldn't bring myself to reach out to them. I couldn't pretend like things were fine. They hadn't changed. They still saw me as a mistake, a second-rate child who had come into their lives when they were trying for something else. They had never understood me, and nothing was going to change that. I spent my time at work and around people who actually saw me. My coworkers were kind, and I began to form friendships that felt real. I went out for coffee with a woman from the office, someone who had once overheard me talking about my family and suggested we meet up. Her name was Sarah, and she had this way of listening that made me feel heard. She didn't judge me for my family dynamics. She didn't try to fix me. She just listened. And that made all the difference. Over the next few months, I started to find my footing. I began to believe that maybe family didn't always have to be the people who shared your blood. Maybe family was made up of the people who chose to be there, the ones who actually cared for you, even when you were at your lowest. But even with all the progress I was making, there were still moments when I couldn't escape the ghosts of my past. There were times when the silence between me and my parents felt unbearable, times when I found myself wondering if things could ever be different. Could I ever have the family I wanted? Could I ever make peace with the fact that I would never be the daughter they dreamed of? One day, I was going through some old family photos when I found a picture of me and Caleb as kids. We were standing together in the backyard of our old house, both of us smiling brightly, the sun setting behind us. I hadn't seen that photo in years. I didn't remember it being taken, but I recognized the happiness on our faces. At that moment, I wondered if there had ever been a time when things felt right between us, when things felt whole. But then I remembered the way they had treated me, the constant reminder that I was never enough, and the smile on my face in that photo faded. I put the picture down gently, feeling a lump form in my throat. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all the years I had spent trying to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for me. A week later, I received a call from my mother. It was the first time I'd heard from her since the dinner at the restaurant. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when I answered, there was an unexpected calmness in her voice. "Delilah," she said softly, "we need to talk." For a moment, I just stood there, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to tell her I wasn't ready to talk. I wasn't ready to confront all the things that had been left unsaid for so many years. But at the same time, I felt like maybe this was the opportunity one had been waiting for, the chance to have the conversation we had never had. "I'm listening," I said finally, my voice steady but cautious. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, but she didn't speak right away. It was as though she were gathering the courage to say something she wasn't sure how to say. "I know things have been difficult between us," she began, her voice faltering slightly. "And I know I've hurt you. I didn't realize how much I was doing it at the time, but I see it now. I want to fix things, Delilah. If you're willing, I'd like us to try again." My heart skipped a beat. The words she spoke were not what I had expected. I didn't know how to react. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive her or if I even wanted to. But part of me wanted to believe that maybe this could be a fresh start. That maybe, after all the years of trying, I could finally have the family I had always dreamed of. But I also knew that there were no guarantees. That no matter how much I wanted to believe her, I couldn't forget the years of hurt, the years of feeling like I didn't matter. So, instead of rushing to forgive her, I took a deep breath. "I need time," I said. "But I'm open to talking. Just not right now." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, I thought she might say something else. But she didn't. She simply agreed. "Okay. Take all the time you need, Delilah. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I hung up the phone, not sure what to feel. Part of me was relieved, but another part was still cautious, still afraid of getting hurt again. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to rush into anything. Not this time. The road to healing wasn't going to be quick, and it wasn't going to be easy. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally in control. I was choosing to take things at my own pace, to decide for myself what was worth holding on to and what was worth letting go. And for once, I felt like I was allowed to choose me. In the weeks that followed my conversation with my mother, I took things slowly. I didn't dive back into the family dynamics, nor did I rush into any decision to forgive. I spent my time focusing on myself, on the life I was building outside of the toxic environment I had grown up in. The quiet days I spent at my apartment became a sanctuary, a place where I could heal at my own pace without feeling the weight of anyone else's expectations. But even in the midst of my healing, I knew there was still something unresolved, a part of me that yearned for justice, for closure. I was done being the silent daughter in the corner of the room. One night, I had dinner with Sarah. Over the past couple of months, she'd become a good friend, someone who understood without judgment. As we sat in a cozy booth in a local cafe, I found myself telling her everything, how my family had treated me, the years of trying to gain their approval, the sting of my mother's toast, and Aunt Margaret's slap. I told her how, deep down, I still wondered if it was possible to reclaim my place in the family. But Sarah, in her usual calm and unassuming way, offered a perspective I hadn't considered. "You don't owe them anything, Delilah," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "They made you feel like you were the one who had to prove yourself. But the truth is, they failed you. They failed to see you for who you are, for what you've done. You've earned everything you have on your own. And they don't get to take that away from you." Her words struck something deep inside me, something that had been buried under years of self-doubt and the constant need to please. I realized that, no matter what happened next, I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their validation. But I did need to stand up for myself, to reclaim my power, my voice. And that meant confronting them on my terms. A few weeks later, I decided it was time to face my family again, but I wasn't going to approach them as the same Delilah who had spent her life chasing after their love. I was different now, and I wasn't afraid to show it. It started with a simple text to Caleb, asking if we could meet for coffee. It had been months since we last spoke, and I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was determined to do this my way. Caleb agreed, and we met at a small cafe not far from where I lived. He was surprised to see me, and I could tell he was nervous about what I might say. "Delilah, it's good to see you," he said, giving me a tentative smile. "How have you been?" "I've been okay," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Better, actually. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realized that I need to make some things clear." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I'm done trying to get their approval," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done trying to make them love me. It's never going to happen, and I don't need it to anymore." Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. I could see the conflict on his face. Part of him wanted to agree, wanted to understand, but another part of him was still holding on to the family structure, the one where everyone just did what they were told and smiled through the pain. "I don't know what to say," he finally admitted, looking down at his coffee. "I'm sorry, Delaware. I didn't know how to help. I didn't know how to stop Mom and Dad from treating you like that." "You don't have to apologize for them," I said, cutting him off. "But you do need to understand that I'm not going to be a part of that anymore. I'm not going to play the role of the invisible daughter anymore." There was a long silence between us. Caleb was digesting what I had said, and I could tell he was struggling to reconcile the Delilah he had known, the quiet, compliant daughter, with the one sitting across from him now, someone who had found the strength to walk away. "I get it," he finally said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I really do. And if you ever want to talk about anything, I'm here." I nodded, appreciating the sentiment, but I knew that this was a turning point. Caleb was still part of that world, and as much as I cared about him, I knew he wasn't going to be the person to help me find closure. That was something I had to do for myself. A few days later, I decided to visit my parents. It had been months since I'd seen them, and I knew it was time to address the elephant in the room. I couldn't let my mother's words or Aunt Margaret's slap fester any longer. I wasn't going to let them dictate how I lived my life anymore. When I walked into their house, it was eerily quiet, just like it always had been. My father was sitting in his armchair, flipping through a newspaper, while my mother was in the kitchen, humming to herself. They didn't even notice me at first. "Delilah," my mother said, her tone cold, like she wasn't sure how to react. "What are you doing here?" "I think it's time we talked," I said, my voice calm but firm. She looked up at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. "About what?" "About everything," I replied. "About the way you've treated me my whole life. About the things you've said and done that have hurt me." My father glanced up from his newspaper, but said nothing. My mother crossed her arms over her chest, looking at me like she was waiting for me to break. "I know I wasn't what you wanted," I continued, my voice steady. "I know I wasn't the son you hoped for, and that you've always seen me as a second choice. But I'm done trying to earn your love. It's never going to happen." The silence in the room was thick, suffocating. My mother didn't say anything at first, but I could see her eyes soften slightly, just for a moment. Then, she spoke. "Delilah, we didn't mean to hurt you. We've always tried to do what we thought was best." I didn't interrupt her. I let her speak, but I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. "No, Mom," I said quietly, my voice stronger now. "You never tried to understand me. You never tried to love me for who I am. You always wanted something I couldn't be. And I'm not going to keep punishing myself for that." There was a long pause before my father spoke up, his voice gruff but with a hint of regret. "We didn't know how to show you that we cared, Delilah. We made mistakes." It wasn't the apology I had hoped for, but it was an acknowledgement, and for once, it felt like they were finally seeing me. They had failed me, and while I couldn't erase the past, I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their validation. I'm not angry anymore, I said quietly. But I'm also not going to keep pretending things are okay when they're not. I turned to leave, and before I walked out the door, I looked back at them. My mother's face had softened, and for the first time in years, I saw a flicker of something resembling guilt in her eyes. I'm moving on, I said, my voice steady. And you should, too. In the weeks that followed, things changed, but not in the way I expected. I didn't suddenly get the loving, supportive family I had dreamed of. What I got instead was something better. I got peace. I got the satisfaction of knowing that I had stood up for myself, of knowing that I had finally reclaimed my power. My relationship with my parents remained distant, and I was okay with that. But I had learned the most important lesson of all, that my worth wasn't tied to their approval. My worth was mine to define. And no amount of their disappointment or shame could ever take that away from me. And as for Aunt Margaret and the necklace? I never saw her wear it again. But somehow, I felt like that was my victory. She could hold on to the trinket, but I had already let go of the burden. And that, in the end, was the sweetest revenge.